Get ready.
So the question today is, what piece of writing advice would you like to know now that you think you'll know at the end of your journey? Diana, welcome to Reality Coaching for Writers, where we offer the real stuff, no fluff, and I'll let you introduce our guest today.
So today we're excited to have Janet Morris Grimes with us. And Janet, I've been getting to know her better as a contributing author on the Inspire a Fire website. Right. And I appreciate those articles that you post for us, Janet. But you are a multi-published author in many different platforms. So we're interested in hearing about that as well.
Well, thank you. I'm thrilled that you asked me to be here. I have so much respect and admiration for both of you. With Diana, I think I snuck that in on you. My very first writers conference, I was the wallflower at the back of the room, had no idea what to do, had requested, it was probably 10 years ago, if not longer, but had no idea what appointments. I kind of was watching appointments and ended up with an appointment with you strictly because you were an agent at that time. Not that I had done a whole lot of research to know what you represented. I didn't even know what I wrote at the time. So, but the first thing I did is I sat down and you prayed with me, and I'll never forget that. It just put everything at ease, and it was very much, what can I do for you? How can I answer your questions? And I think that's what we did, because I didn't have anything to present. I didn't have this manuscript that was polished and ready to go. I just had ideas running around my head, and you treated me like that mattered, and I appreciate that.
Awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. It's just hard to get started sometimes in this business. But so looking back on where I've come since then, I would say, so my first novel was published in 2021. It's called Solomon's Porch, and it's done quite well. It was a Carroll Award finalist last year, and I was thrilled with that. Because all I wanted was a good product and a chance, because I think so much of the marketing and everything is up to us. And I think agents are attracted to people who are out there doing a bunch of stuff. So I think that would be one piece of advice, is give yourself permission to try whatever. Sometimes we think, well, I don't know how to do that. Well, then you surround yourself with people who figured it out, and just try. Some things work, some things don't. But if you don't market, no one's ever going to know what you've done. So I think that is a lesson I still learn every day. Let's put it that way. Yeah, I don't want to keep.
That's a great piece of advice, Janet.
Yeah, I don't want to do all the talking, so feel free to interrupt and let me know if you need me to head in a particular direction. But
well, I did have a question about Solomon's Porch. So, what was the inspiration behind the story? I mean, what got you going that direction?
So I wrote it down in my Bible, actually. In 2016, I was reading in Acts, and it mentioned Solomon's Porch, and I underlined it and wrote book title with a question mark, and did some research as to what Solomon's Porch was. It was the outdoor porch of the temple. It was massive, I think, like the size of a football field, the temple itself. Wow. And so the porch itself was but it's where people came. People were healed there. Jesus walked there. I was kind of mesmerized by this thought of a modern day Solomon's Porch, a place you could go for healing or if you needed direction. And so then, I pictured Solomon as an old man, and in my book, he needs help. He's injured right off the bat, and I just wondered who was going to come to his rescue. And the more I answered those questions, it's modern day small town, a military town where they've closed the base. So the base is, the town's falling apart and nobody's taking care of things, including Solomon. And so it was really interesting to pull all that together. And those characters are so real to me, partially based on people I've known, and just based on people who were touched by a man that once helped them through their life. And so I love the story. It could go so many different directions. And I'm really happy that was my debut novel. I'm happy that nothing else worked out before that one,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, yes. So you hit on something that I picked up on as a possible advice for writers. You mentioned just then that you knew people like this already in your life, right? So it
Yes.
made it a little bit easier. Is that
I
right?
think I think so. I think they say that I write in deep point of view, and to me, I have to stand in their shoes and know what this feels like and
Yeah.
from their perspective. And so I probably didn't know what deep point of view or that I was writing that way 5 years ago, but now I don't know how to write any other way. I think it's real important for your characters to be authentic and act the way we might act if we were in that situation. My antagonist in this book is someone who made a mistake, and he's not a bad guy. He's just someone who made a mistake. I have as many people pulling for him as I do Solomon. So it's interesting how that's happened, because I don't know that was intentional, but it's because I stood in his shoes.
Yeah.
Oh, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And, agents and publishers want that deep point of view because Eddie and I've talked about that many times, developing your characters, getting inside their head, because even the bad guys have a story. There's a story. And that's where the magic happens, when these stories, come and meet and collide. And then every character then has a choice and a direction to go in after that meeting. But that's beautiful, beautiful. And I love that you got your original thought from reading your Bible in the morning, or whenever you do it. And I think a lot of my best ideas come from when I'm in the presence of God.
I do that. I do a lot of that. I do a lot of walking. I'll get so far. I feel like God's not going to show me the rest of the story till I do what he told me to do, and so I'll kind of park it, let it simmer, and go walk. And then before long, I've got the next thing that's supposed to happen, or someone who enters the room and why they matter, So I'm still learning all of that. I'd love to be quicker with it. I would love to say I could write a book a year. I haven't found, I'm still working on learning to write and market at the same time, So it's two such different ways of using your brain, and they're both exhausting. So those who do it well and can flip hats and make it look easy, I'm not there yet.
Well, Eddie understands that, don't you, Eddie? He does the same for his own writing.
Yeah, I do the writing in the morning, and the afternoon is usually the marketing side of stuff. Come back and write at night. So the other question I had was, you had an experience with writing a fairy tale story about your dad, and tell us a little bit about that and how that impacted your writing.
That's all I've ever known. My father was a minister, and he was killed in a car wreck when I was a baby. So I didn't have the before. I had a picture of this man with a mysterious smile and a bunch of things I made up about him. And so I didn't even know I was creating stories, but I was trying to come to terms with that. I couldn't, in some ways, I think God protected me because I didn't know life before that. But in other ways, I had no memories. And so I had to create some, or what would it be like if this happened? What would it be like if he could come eat lunch with me today? And those are all fairy tale stories. It's not my reality, but it's also what you do when you're with pain and with, and when I wrote, anything was possible. When I wrote, I felt like I could hear his voice. And so I feel like I don't know that I'd be a writer without that experience, because I just had to process, and that's the only way I knew to do it is, well, what if this? And then I feel like most of my stories end up being lonely people looking for families that may not have, their own. So it's community and second chances, I think it just spreads out into, well, there's a lot of people that feel this way. What can we do together?
Yeah.
So you played into the hand that I'm holding over here, which is the thing we desire oftentimes most often, the thing we want most that's lacking in our life is the thing we write about.
Oh, absolutely.
We make it up. We make it work for us, because we don't have it. So we just make it up.
Right. Yeah. And I
Isn't
think in some ways that gives us the advantage. I don't know.
yeah.
It's a weird way to say that, but not that I would choose to go through that, but
Yeah.
because it's not fake, it's going to reveal itself in a lot of stories, and people are going to know. I think a lot of people can't voice how they really feel, but when they read it, they're like, "There it is. Somebody understands me."
Yes,
Yeah.
that's me as a reader, Janet.
Right.
That's why I love to read so much, because you put into words what I'm feeling. And
Right.
it actually, in situations like this, it validates my feelings and doesn't make
Exactly.
me feel like I'm the only one in the world going
Mm-hmm.
through this, which, our enemy always wants to isolate us and
Absolutely.
ask, have us be the only one that's gone through this. But I love that, because really, first of all, the processing, writing is so good for processing,
Right.
emotions. And I am amazed that you began that and latched onto that when you were young, because that's beautiful. But God knew your journey. Um, and you've walked in that. But also, isn't it redemptive that what the enemy means to harm us with? How many young children lose their parent and get angry at God and stay
Mm-hmm.
angry at God their whole life, and then they become hard human beings and mean,
Right.
and but you're you in writing, and now in offering these deep point of view characters for your readers, you're redeeming all of that by faithfully picking up your pen, by taking that idea that was dropped in your spirit and then developing it and writing. So that's beautiful, really beautiful. Thank you for that. Also, you have worked with the Nashville Arts, how and written for them. Can you
Yes, it's
talk
a
about that?
Nashville Arts and Entertainment. It's a magazine. I believe I started as a music reviewer, kind of here's
Okay.
a new album. Nashville's full of music. I'm from Nashville. I live in Kentucky now, but Nashville's
Okay.
home. I'm still there once a month, at least. And just through connections, someone found out, I was kind of doing some freelance writing at the time, and they said, "Would you try this?" And then it became interviewing authors. I did a few feature articles on, a new music program at a college there or something like that. So it really stretched me and helped me learn. And sometimes I couldn't even access the artist who were, the music artists. I would just have to write about it, listen to it myself, and research as much as I could to present this new album, where it came from. If someone may have gone solo for just one album, and what's the story behind that. And to me, it was, when you listen to albums, they're like reading a novel. They're designed in an order, and they tell a story. One in particular was, my daughter works with Alzheimer's patients there in Nashville. And one story I got the chance to do, it was is Jay. I have to think of his last name, but his mother had been diagnosed, early diagnosis, and she was fairly young. And he had a song called Blank Stare, and it was talking about how his mother would start. It opens with her leaving him a voicemail, and then she can't remember what she's going to say, and you hear all that, and then he sings this song to her, and it's tear jerking and moving, and
Wow.
he donated all profits. So it's just, at that point, we're all right there in the middle of a story together, and we want her to be okay, and what does it mean for him, and what is he learning? I think the arts, writing is one of them, but I think there's so much we can
Wow.
do to connect that way. And nobody knows what to do about Alzheimer's, and it's going to affect all of us, if it hasn't already. And that's a beautiful story, just to share it in that way. So writing for magazines to me was just another way to find some great stories. and share it in a way that I would like. I'm not trained in music, I don't know a B flat and all that, but I know what the story means and why it's kind of cool to listen to this new album, sung a different way. So that's kind of how I presented that. And everything's a chance to connect. And I feel like that's how I approach that whole opportunity.
Mm.
So if I was pulling a tip for writers out of that, I would say it's not that you deliberately stepped out. You didn't intentionally step out of your genre. You just stepped out and just went in a different direction as a writer and did something completely different and benefited from other artists doing something a little bit different. Right?
Absolutely. And it stretched me. Someone asked if you'd be willing, and I said, well, I'll learn how. I think that's really good advice for any kind of writing. There's people writing video games now that didn't, video games probably weren't a thing when they were first writing. So, but hey, let's learn how. That's what I mean. Surround yourself with people who know how to do this, and let's figure this out. So,
Yeah. Oh, that's such good advice. So good. Thank you. And
Yes.
a weeks ago about the stories that can actually transform someone's life.
Right. I think you have to follow it. You can't rush it. You can't, to me,
And they can be in the middle of it and then they yeah, they can entertain the thought, I could make that choice and I could
right.
change the direction of my life. Why not? So
Absolutely.
have you gotten any correspondence? Have you gotten correspondence from your readers, feedback from readers
I definitely have, more so than I anticipated. A lot of people just, they felt seen maybe because Solomon was this man who had a story, of course. He had some tragedy, and so he looked for people who needed a friend, and there's a lot of people out there like that. Or they would recall someone, a gentleman at church or a family, somebody that took them in that way, and what kind of difference that makes. So I really, that's my favorite part about writing. Awards are wonderful, but an email that says, I can't put your book down and I just finished and I feel like we just experienced that together. I think that's probably as rewarding as any award you could get, is someone taking the time to invest 7 or 8 hours into reading your story and then telling you that it really meant something to them.
I can
So
imagine.
as a devotional writer, how do you balance between writing more of a spiritual aspect of things and then compared to the fiction and the other work that you do in your writing? How does that work out for you?
To me, it's all kind of one and the same. It's what is God trying to tell me this week? What am I learning? When I do go on a walk, what's the message that I'm hearing, or what am I missing? What have I lost touch with? And so it may show up in a scripture, in a devotional, and then that same theme, not in a preachy way, but that same theme may show up in a story, that says, because if I'm struggling with it, someone else may as well. So I think devotional is just asking your question, what's helped me this week, and could it help others? I wrote a story. I don't even know that you call it a story. I lost my mother a few months ago, and this vivid memory came back to me of, she was a school teacher, and of sitting at the kitchen table, and those old paper cutters, those vintage, they're noisy, they got the huge blade, and I was right back at the kitchen table just helping her trim flashcards. But through that, she was telling me to, hug the edges and throw the trash away, and all these life stories. And I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna share that. And it's really a story about a paper cutter, but it's so much more. And then I compared it to writing and how editing is trimming the edges and letting it shine, let the story stand alone, and not getting too close, not cutting out too much. But somehow that all came to me on a walk, and me sitting at the kitchen table with my mother trimming some flashcards. So I think, and then with that is a scripture that says, do everything to the glory, because it was just a job she asked me to do, and I was honored to be able to. I was 6 or 7 at the time, and I thought, I'm really helping her tonight, and So stuff like that. I think it's everywhere. Story, connection, you know, the way to share it, that's not just here's a scripture, do better, you know. That's that sort of
So,
thing.
so do you think living in Kentucky, I mean, you said you're from Tennessee originally, do you think living in Kentucky gives you a source of inspiration for your stories and your devotions?
I think it gives me more time.
Okay.
We've moved. We're out in the country on a couple of acres, and every street in my area is a dead end. And that wasn't Nashville. You know, Nashville had gotten pretty busy, and I love Nashville, but I'd feel guilty trying to stay home to write if I were in Nashville. So I think that's what it's done is giving me permission. And COVID gave me permission to sit down and say no to a few things, and because I'm not so good at doing that on my own.
Sitting down and writing?
Yeah, saying no and not, you
Yeah.
know, filling my schedule with everything.
Okay.
And so back to your original question, you were asking what I wish I'd known as a writer.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
My number one piece of advice would be stop talking about it and write. Because I've been to 3 or 4 writers conference. I'm like, well, let me tell you about this story I'm going to write. Well, it's not written yet, so nobody cares. It doesn't matter how long I talk about it. I've got to do it. And I think there's some power in that, you know, but it's really just finish and then see what happens with it, you know?
I guess it's a little bit like saying, I'm going to get pregnant one day. I'm going to get pregnant one day. Then all of a sudden you have your child and you never talk about getting pregnant again. It's like you're just trying to keep up at that point.
Right, right.
So,
That's a great word picture, Eddie.
so kind of as a last closing question, what are some of the challenges that you've run into as a writer? I mean, we talked a little bit about some of them, but maybe one that maybe you didn't anticipate that you bumped into.
I think there's so much with marketing. My Solomon's Portion, I've got a children's book out too. It's called Do Your Best Test. And the funny thing is so I went to this class that said, write the book you wish you'd read as a child. And Do Your Best Test is about someone who never finishes what she starts, which is just what I was talking about. So she gets distracted easily, and she doesn't understand why it's important to do that. So I think, with marketing, I think that's been the hardest thing for me because it doesn't come naturally, and it feels odd to talk about, your own writing. But then I remember that Jesus gathered people and traveled, and he told his story, and here's why it matters to you, and he wasn't ashamed of that. And so that's marketing, and so I think once I learned that, I thought, okay, how do I do this where it's organic and I'm not shoving it down people's throats? People say, my publisher says bookstores are a terrible place to put your book. So then it's discovering where to put your book. What is it? Craft fairs? Do you have a booth and dress like your character and stand there and just make conversation with people? Do you? I know, Eddie, you're involved in sending books into prisons. That's not about selling books. That's about getting stories into people's hands who have time to read and need them. So I think a lot of it is asking why we're doing this, because it's not to be a bestseller. And if it is, I think we'd be really sad people. Hold on, sorry. But because that ebbs and flows, sales come over time, and the book's out there, and 10 years from now, it might be discovered by 500 book clubs. I don't know, but it's got to be out there to do it. I know that if I'm still sitting here talking about it, nobody's going to know about it, if I haven't written it yet. So I think that is just what I didn't expect, was the 24-hourness of it, that you can't just market for a month and then say, okay, I did it. I've still got to get in libraries. I've got to, for my children's book, I need to go read to classrooms. And that's not, most writers are introverts and would rather be behind a desk, being creative. And that's a whole different skill set that it calls you to polish up and find a way to be good at it, whether it feels natural or not.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
So, Diane, there's one last question on the back end of that. So aside from the challenges, what's the other part of that question? Do you remember? Do you have it in front of you?
Um,
I think was it the blessings? Yeah, I get that was it.
well,
So Janet, so what blessings have you received from
yes,
writing
yes,
that you
yeah.
didn't anticipate? I mean, you were thinking maybe sales and enough money that you would retire, but if that didn't happen,
I'll let
what
you know if that happens. And I'll say it hasn't happened yet. The blessings are a teenager saying, "Tell me how to do this when I grow up,"
Mm,
because I didn't even know how to ask that question as a teenager. The blessings are someone saying, "I can't stop thinking about your characters. When is the sequel coming out?" Uh, because that means it worked. I didn't know for sure. You'd spend 2 years writing or whatever. I guess Solomon was probably it was my debut novel, but probably my fourth or fifth book that I wrote overall. So there's a whole lot of, no, it's not quite there. You kind of have to brush it aside and keep getting better and keep getting better. And then finally you get an idea powerful enough to say, I'm going to put everything else aside and I'm going to work on this one. But even then, you don't know that people are going to connect with it until it's out there. So I think that's been the biggest blessing is that, like I said, I wanted a good product and a chance, and I think that's worked better than I expected.
That's good.
well, it did not just happen though by chance. You did the work.
Yes,
You
yes,
sat and you wrote distractions. And I think something you said there we often hear, and we're quickly running out of time, but you said it was my fourth or fifth
mm-hmm.
that eventually found a publisher. And
Right,
that is so often the case, but we have met people that are not willing to let go of their first novel.
right,
And they just keep knocking on the same doors and getting the same answer. And that's such a key thing to be able to lay that down and realize it served a purpose,
mm-hmm.
helped you learn more about the craft, but you've
Right,
got to be willing to lay it aside and then continue to write. and
mm-hmm.
and we've heard this, I can't tell you how many times. Well, published authors say it was my fourth or
Right,
fifth novel, and every once in a while they will go back to one of those
right,
previously written books and they will polish it up. But they said most of the time they realize it's not worth investing time in to rework it, and they
right.
let it go. They just let it go. But
I think I will
I
go
love.
back. Yeah, I think one day I will. Um, my first writers conference, that's one of the first things they said.
Do
And
you
that's
think?
not what I wasn't ready to hear it. I'm like, well, can I just start with my fifth one so we can, get on with this? But no, you can't, because all those are invested hours in learning and
Yeah.
finding what works and finding, learning how to show and not tell. For show not
Mm.
tell, I feel like you know it when you read it. If it's all telling, about 3 pages in, you thought, well, something's flat about this. Even if you don't fully understand what's happening, you recognize that it's just someone telling you what they did and not letting you walk through it with them. So it takes a while to learn that. It
Yeah.
definitely does.
And if I ever figure it out, I'll let somebody know.
Oh, you figured it out. You show in so many ways.
Well,
Especially
yeah,
when he's dressed
yeah,
up like a pirate, right?
Right.
my secret to show not tell. In fact, this comes to me in dreams more often than not.
Uh-huh.
Uh, I dream I'm somewhere talking, and I know I'm talking too much. God keeps revealing that to me over and over again, and I think that's His way of saying, "Be quick to listen."
Right.
Mm.
Interesting.
And in other words, He knows you just need to shut up, boy. Anyway, that's enough about me. Janet, thank you for being with us today. Thank you
Yes.
for the tips. And
thank you for
hey,
asking.
we didn't ask you, what are you working on now? What's the next big project you're working on?
You know, I mentioned this earlier. They tell you to pick a lane and stay in it. I haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
I think my next one will be a rom-com. I think Solomon will have a sequel, but I'm just not ready to. So I think it's going to be based on my daughter and her little Alzheimer's patients. And it's fictitious, of
Oh.
course, but this story came to me and I love it. I can't wait to finish it. Because I could tell you, we could get together 2 years from now and I could tell you about it some more, but it won't matter if I haven't written it. So
Yeah. Well, let me know when you're working on it well, because I love rom-coms. My wife and I like watching rom-coms a lot. It's our favorite
yeah,
genre.
I think they're pretty popular, and
Yeah.
I think this one will be a good one. It's my older people are my comedy, so I really like it.
Good. Well, thank
That's
you very
great.
much, Janet. And Diana, we'll be back next week with another episode of
Yes, we
Reality
will.
Coaching.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
week, everybody. Thank you, Janet.
Bye. Thank you.